There are approximately 15 million Jews in the world, and about 7 million are Americans. Although small in number, Judaism's adherents, particularly in Israel, make headlines almost every day. An ancient religion, Judaism has survived over a long and turbulent history. How does it continue to inspire Jews today? The story of Judaism begins in about 1800 BC in the Fertile Crescent near the junction of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers north of the Persian Gulf. According to Jewish belief, Abraham heard the call of God and was directed to the land of Israel. The book of Genesis tells us that God tested Abraham by asking that he sacrifice his son Isaac. But God spared Isaac, and as a reward for Abraham's devotion, God told him that he would be the father of many nations. Isaac had a son, Jacob, who in turn had 12 sons, from whom were descended the 12 tribes of Israel. The descendants of the 12 sons of Jacob were enslaved by the pharaohs in Egypt. In approximately 1290 BC, Moses rose from among the Hebrew people to lead them out of captivity. According to Jewish doctrine, God revealed his word to Moses in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. Moses taught a doctrine called ethical monotheism, belief in only one God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God, the Lord is one. Moses also taught that this God called the children of Israel to an ethic, to certain moral duties and obligations. And the Hebrew people undertook a covenant with God to obey the law as it had been revealed to them.
The idea of the covenant is the idea that God and Israel are bound together. Each have responsibilities, and each are bound into a permanent relationship, much like a marriage. It's a relationship in which God limits his freedom, and Israel, namely the Jewish people, assumes a responsibility to adhere to the commandments, to live a life of justice, a life of compassion, a life of decency. And both are bound in a relationship that will not end.
Written in the ancient Hebrew language, the Torah contains a multitude of laws, of which the 10 Commandments are the best known. For many centuries, the words of the Torah have been interpreted, expanded, and adapted by scholars and learned rabbis.
The Torah has given rise to a vast literature of commentary. The most important part of that literature of commentary is something called the Talmud, which was called the Oral Torah. Talmud is a compilation. Part of it is a legal document, part of it is a philosophical document, part of it is a document that tells tales, namely stories, the most important stories of commentary on the Bible. And it's a vast document of 66 different volumes, and part of what it means to be a rabbi is to be able to understand how to read the document, how to read the Talmud, because Talmud itself is written not in Hebrew and not in English, but in Aramaic, in a very difficult, very ancient language that's not in contemporary use.
Between the time of Moses and the emergence of the Roman Empire, a number of great leaders arose to lead the Jews. Among them were Joshua, who led his people into the Promised Land; Samuel, who united the quarreling Jewish tribes; and Saul, who led the Jews to victory over the Philistines and became the first king of Israel. After Saul came David, slayer of Goliath and conqueror of Jerusalem. The book of Psalms in the Bible is attributed to David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. After David came King Solomon. During his reign, the Temple of Jerusalem was built, and it became the center for Jewish learning and worship. Later, Jerusalem came under the power of Rome and was ruled by Roman governors, of whom Pontius Pilate was the most notorious. It was under his rule that Jesus of Nazareth was crucified, and a new religion, that of Christianity, began. In 70 AD, following a violent Jewish rebellion, the Romans crushed the rebels and destroyed the Jewish state. Many Jews fled, taking with them the sacred objects of the temple. The temple was torn down, and only its western wall remained. Jews were admitted to the city only once a year to visit the Wailing Wall. and they had to pay for the privilege for nearly 2,000 years. Between the time of Moses and the destruction of the temple, the Jewish religion was enriched by the prophets of Israel.
And the job of the prophet was to view the world from the perspective of God and view God from the perspective of humanity. And unlike ordinary political leaders who may make deals and may get along, the prophet's job was to speak truth to power. And that is that he confronted the king and the state and the people whenever they strayed from what was desired and what God wanted from them.
After the Roman destruction of Jerusalem came the diaspora, or dispersion. The Jews were scattered throughout the Near Eastern countries in Europe. But the law and the rabbis held their faith together. Jewish law wasn't only spiritual, it was also social and civil, governing everything from the preparation of food to the punishment for crimes. Within the Roman Empire, the Jewish religion was regarded as troublesome and rebellious and was often suppressed. After Christianity became the official religion of Rome in 313 AD, Emperor Theodosius and his successors turned against the Jews. The Romans barred them from holding important government positions and passed other laws against them. In 634 AD, a third major religion, Islam, emerged in the ancient world. Under the leadership of the successors of the Prophet Muhammad, the Muslim empire expanded rapidly throughout the Mediterranean world. Relations between Jews and Muslims were not always harmonious. But in Spain, between the 10th and 13th centuries, the golden age of medieval Judaism occurred under Muslim rule. Spain had a magnificent culture far more advanced than any other in Europe at that time. Moses Maimonides, a Jewish Spaniard, was a great scholar of the era.
Maimonides, who lived in the 12th century, is perhaps the most famous and most important Jew of the Middle Ages. And partly because of his stature among the Jewish people, he was able to accomplish something that few have been able to accomplish, and that is to get many Jews to agree, in this case to agree on the fundamental principles of Judaism. He enunciated 13 of them, beginning with the belief in the one God and the belief in the truth of the prophecy of Moses as we have it in the Torah, and talking about the Jewish hope of eternal life and the Jewish conviction that Israel has a mission to the world. And these 13 principles are the closest that anyone has come to creating a consensus definition of Jewish belief.
Beyond Spain, in other parts of Europe, Jews were often subject to persecution. Many Christians blamed the Jews for the crucifixion of Christ. Jews were confined in ghettos and at times forced out of the country. Jews were expelled from parts of Germany in 1096, from Paris in 1182, from England in 1290, and finally even from Spain in 1492. In the 1700s, the enlightened philosophies of men like John Locke of England and Jean-Jacques Rousseau of France brought greater recognition of human rights to Europe and a lessening of persecution and discrimination. In America, the Bill of Rights gave full civil rights to people of all religions, including Jews. France followed the American example after the French Revolution. Germany and other countries did the same in later years, and synagogues began to appear in major European cities. Greater freedom enabled Jews to participate more fully in society. The music of Felix Mendelssohn, the literature of Heinrich Heine and later Franz Kafka, the psychology of Sigmund Freud, all testify to the impact of Jewish thought and creativity on Western culture. Jewish emigration to the United States began in the colonial period, but it wasn't until the latter part of the 19th century that large numbers arrived. Between 1890 and 1924, more than 2 million Jewish immigrants, mostly from Eastern Europe, came to the United States. These new Americans added much to their country. In 1916, President Wilson nominated Louis Brandeis as the first Jewish Supreme Court justice. Albert Einstein made fundamental discoveries in physics that altered our understanding of the universe. The music of Benny Goodman and Irving Berlin, the art of Vasily Kandinsky and Mark Rothko, and the comic genius of Charlie Chaplin enriched American culture. Jewish synagogues added an interesting new dimension to the architectural landscape, in a land where religious freedom means toleration for all forms of worship. But the Holocaust of World War II shattered the illusion that the days of persecution for Jews were over. The attempted extermination of the Jewish people by Hitler was the worst of the pogroms that have occurred in Europe over the last 1,000 years. After the Holocaust, many Jews felt their religion could no longer survive only in their hearts and minds. And following World War II, in 1948, the Jewish state of Israel was established in Palestine. To Jews, Israel represented the homeland they had longed for throughout centuries of persecution. To Palestinians and others in the Arab world, the creation of Israel was an act of Western imperialism. These conflicting views have resulted in several wars between Arab nations and Israel since the creation of Israel. This is, to some degree, a clash of religions, but especially it is a complicated political and social dispute. Despite war, migration, and persecution, the basic beliefs of the Jewish faith have not altered much over the course of many centuries. However, there are different views on the relationship between ancient Judaic traditions and Jewish law in the modern world. Today, there are three main branches to the Jewish religion: Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform. Orthodox Jews hold tightly to traditional practices. These include restrictions on what is fit or kosher to eat. Driving a car, movies, and other entertainment are also forbidden on the Sabbath. Hasidic Jews are a smaller group among the Orthodox. Reform Jews believe that old customs sometimes wear out. They have relaxed dietary restrictions and also permit non-religious activities on the Sabbath. Conservative Jews try to find a middle way between orthodoxy and reform. Members of all branches of the Jewish faith attend synagogue or temple. A rabbi or teacher leads the service, much as in a Christian church.
Together we say, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one.
And children attend religious school at the local synagogue. At the age of 13, boys become bar mitzvah, and in many congregations, girls become bat mitzvah. They are held to be adults, responsible for fulfilling the commandments of the Torah. Women rabbis are found in both the Reform and Conservative congregations, but women have always played an important role in Judaism. It is women who pass on Jewish tradition and religion in the Jewish household. One of the things that has made Judaism survive is that every home is a synagogue. There is a very strong participation and affirmation of traditional rituals and values. The Jewish year revolves around a number of festivals and holy days. The Sabbath, starting at sundown on Friday and lasting until sundown on Saturday, is the most important day of the week.
Of all Jewish holidays, festivals, and observances, the most important, without question, is the Sabbath. It is the only one that was created when the world was created. And even though it comes every week, that does not make its arrival less momentous. It is observed both in the synagogue and especially in the home. And it is a time when we recall the creation of the world, we recall the creation of our people from slavery in Egypt to redemption in the land of Israel. And we are reminded above all that the created world that we inhabit and that the lives that we lead are gifts from God. At least 1/7 of the time we are commanded to devote ourselves to appreciation and not merely exploitation.
The Jewish New Year, called Rosh Hashanah, comes in the fall. Yom Kippur, Hanukkah, and Passover are other major holidays. Thus, the Jewish year unfolds with a cycle of remembrance, repentance, and celebration. Judaism is a religion with a deep dedication to tradition and to the law revealed to Moses. The Jewish religion has sustained its people throughout a long and tumultuous history, and the ancient covenant between man and God made centuries ago is reaffirmed each Sabbath in synagogues and Jewish homes around the world.
Bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam, bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam. Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom.